Set. Support, set. Target inbound.
Left side, lift and shift. Right side, set. Moving.
So I was still a senior in high school when the towers fell, and if it weren't for that action taking place, the military would have never been on a trajectory in my life. You know, I didn't know much at 18, but I felt that going to serve after something like that was something that you go and you do. I didn't really know anything about the military other than my grandfather served, my uncle served, and eventually my cousins that were older than me would serve as well. My grandpa was actually a Philippine commando in the U.S. Army during World War II. My uncle was in LRS, an airborne unit in Vietnam, and my older cousin would be part of the Iraqi invasion, and that framed where I wanted to serve. So up until, I got ready to ship out, saw a lot of headlines in the newspapers about the exploits that special forces were performing overseas, and I switched my contract, not fully having the confidence to say, hey, I can do this, or this is a smart decision. And, naive ambition, I want to go fight in a war, not realizing how naive that statement is until you actually get to a war. But I think that's a story that's been told, time and again, the soldier's experience. I got to be a part of a very unique group. We were the wartime 18 X-rays. We were often called war babies or SF babies because we were guys that would otherwise not have been attracted to the military, taken off the streets, and put straight into an opportunity to try out for Special Forces training. Not guaranteed, but we had a shot to go to selection. And this was an eclectic group. This was lawyers, bankers from Wall Street, guys with no high school diploma, but a particular set of skills that they learned otherwise on the streets. Just a diverse group of guys that knew that they wanted to serve their country. And that created a unique environment because when we were going through training, when we actually got selected and we made it through the Q course, you had a lot of the hardened NCOs from the initial campaigns in Iraq and Afghanistan interacting with us idiots off the streets with, maybe varying degrees of life experience, but, zero understanding of what combat is like outside of what we'd seen in movies. One of the big things we learned during the initial pushes was you can't be rigid with your operations. Like, you have to train guys to be able to adapt on a daily basis so that they can meet, the threat as it changes, or more importantly, the mission as it changes. Because, when you invade a country for, political end states, those political objectives, they change routinely. You got to be a part of the post-invasion counterinsurgency group that saw a huge shift in doctrine. A lot of the September 10th mindset, that's what it was coined, was pushed to the left. A lot of that stuff was discarded, and we saw how the veterans from the invasions were changing stuff and how they were placing an emphasis on, guys being able to adapt under very uncertain circumstances. A lot of us guys off the street, we joined because we thought special forces meant you shoot a lot, you ride around in helicopters, and you lift weights, and you're just badass. And that could not be further than the truth from what a real SF guy is. A real SF guy, loves to work out, he loves to shoot, but it's about his ability to be a leader. It's about his intellectual adaptability, his ability to read an environment, read personalities, and to immediately understand how to leverage his opposition. So it was unique being in that environment with the counterinsurgency campaigns, and that frames how I teach now. That frames how I am able to be on the range with a student and say, hey, here's your left and your right limit. Now I want you to go and accomplish this task, and not necessarily say, hey, here's where the standard is right here. So one of the things that gets overlooked with the counterinsurgency campaigns is the emotional toll that takes on guys. And there's a lot of guys that have done good to create positive narratives for helping guys recover from PTSD. But the fact of the matter is that when you're overseas for a 6-month, 10-month, 12-month, 15-month stretch, and you're interacting with a population that you perceive as hostile, it is natural for guys to develop an emotional numbing mechanism to cope with their environment. It just helps you as a survival skill. When guys separate from the military, that same emotional numbing can be the same thing that cripples them completely when it goes and they transition into their civilian life. And this is where I think we see some of the more painful transitions take place, where you see guys who were just lion-hearted in the military become civilians and then fall apart because they don't know what to do. Because when I was in the military, it was always, hey, what's the next school I'm going to? What's the next deployment I'm going to? What's the next pre-mission train up? What's the next rank I'm getting? You always have the next thing to look forward to. And very rarely do guys learn how to just deal with now, the present. Because there's always the next thing. There's always the next thing. So when I left the military, that was honestly the first time that I had to, by myself, say, who is Aaron? Not who's Sergeant First Class Barruga, who's Aaron? So I think a lot of guys struggle with finding what that sense of self is, or you could even call it their mission after the military. And I think one of the biggest things that would help them down that path is you need to tell yourself, I'm not special. You need to identify the feeling you had when you were a kid on the street and you decided to enlist, to go fight in a war. You were willing to make yourself vulnerable to pursue something to achieve greatness. That level of vulnerability and being able to embrace it again and harness it to accomplish new things as a civilian, I think is so important for guys, so that they don't end up just being what we see a lot of, unfortunately, today, is the veteran that's just disgruntled and angry because he went and he fought and he sacrificed, and we are appreciative of that. But that doesn't mean you stop growing. If you're always looking back to the past for your accomplishments, if you're always looking back and you're not looking forward, you're not growing. If I thought I could lift as many weights as I wanted to work through stuff, if I thought that just going and shooting guns would help me work through stuff. And through my writing, I was able to articulate stuff. And then once I learned how to fine tune it and better tailor it, it helped me to project it outwards to reach guys that maybe think the same way but didn't know if anyone else was. That, hey, this is stuff that other guys are thinking about as well. So the more satisfying things I'd see is when guys would just kind of resonate with it. Not because it was political, it wasn't religious, it wasn't spiritual. It was just talking about the GI's experience. When I went to college after the military, I was very fortunate to meet two of my favorite authors. Tim O'Brien, writing one of the more prolific novels about the Vietnam War. It doesn't ask why, it's just, hey, this is the experience of these guys. Like the guys that went and fought, they're human beings, and this is what they experience. Similarly with meeting Carl Volantis, and his work being a little bit more military with its theme, but again, just telling the emotional story, because I think that's what's the most important part. And Tim gave me some of the best advice I've ever gotten with regards to writing, and that is go somewhere emotionally uncomfortable and write from there. And that's helped me break things down that I otherwise wouldn't have if I still tried to be Sergeant First Class Barruga when I'm just Aaron.